Standing in the doorway of the Grandview Hotel's elegant ballroom, I smoothed down my navy dress and took a deep breath. The wedding reception was already in full swing, with crystal chandeliers casting warm light over tables draped in ivory silk. I never thought I would be attending Daniel's wedding, especially not as a guest. 3 years had passed since our relationship ended, and here I was watching him celebrate marrying someone else. I made my way toward the buffet table, trying to blend in with the other guests. That's when she appeared. Ashley, the bride, swept over in her designer gown, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the light. She looked me up and down with obvious disdain before reaching over and snatching my plate right out of my hands. Her voice dripped with condescension as she declared, "Staff eat in the kitchen." The entire ballroom fell silent. The crystal stemware seemed to vibrate with tension as every conversation halted mid-sentence. I could feel the heat of 100 pairs of eyes boring into me, waiting to see how I would react to such public humiliation. Ashley stood there with my plate in her manicured hands, her emerald engagement ring catching the chandelier light as she smirked with satisfaction. The silence stretched unbearably until I simply smiled, set down my champagne flute on the nearest table, and began walking toward the grand entrance. That's when I heard the rapid clicking of dress shoes against marble flooring. Daniel appeared beside me, his face flushed and panicked, still wearing his black tuxedo, with the boutonniere slightly crooked from rushing. His dark hair was disheveled, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the hotel's perfect climate control. "Bertha, wait! Where are you going?" His voice cracked with desperation as he reached for my arm. I paused at the ornate double doors, turning to face him with that same calm smile. Behind him, I could see Ashley standing frozen by the buffet table, still clutching my plate like a trophy. Wedding guests whispered frantically among themselves, some already pulling out their phones to capture whatever was about to unfold. "I'm leaving Daniel. This clearly isn't my kind of event." I gestured toward the opulent ballroom with its gold-leafed walls and imported Italian marble columns. "Please don't go because of what Ashley said. She's just stressed about the wedding. You know how brides can be on their special day." His words tumbled out in a rush, his hands gesturing wildly as he tried to explain away his new wife's behavior. I tilted my head slightly, studying his face. Even after 3 years apart, I could read every expression, every nervous tick. The way his left eye twitched when he was lying. How his voice pitched higher when he was trying to convince himself of something he didn't really believe. "Actually, Daniel, I think Ashley was absolutely right about one thing." I paused, watching confusion cloud his features. "There are definitely people here who don't belong." Before he could respond, I pointed directly at the stunning venue around us. "You see, I own this hotel. Every marble tile you're standing on, every crystal hanging from these chandeliers, every thread in those silk tablecloths. And I've just decided to cancel your reception. You have exactly 15 minutes to vacate the premises." The color drained from Daniel's face so quickly I thought he might actually faint. His mouth opened and closed wordlessly like a fish gasping for air. Behind him, I could see the wedding coordinator, Patricia, frantically approaching her clipboard clutched against her chest, and her professional smile wavering. "That's impossible," Daniel whispered, shaking his head in denial. "The booking was made months ago. My father-in-law handled all the arrangements personally." "Oh, Richard handled the arrangements beautifully." I agreed, pulling out my phone and showing him the property deed displayed on the screen. "He just didn't know he was booking with Blackstone Hospitality Group. That's my company, Daniel. The same business empire I built from absolutely nothing after you walked out on me." James, the hotel manager I had handpicked and trained personally, appeared at my side with perfect timing. His silver hair was impeccably groomed, and his charcoal suit fit him like it was custom-tailored, which it was. I made sure all my employees were well compensated and professionally presented. Ms. Williams, shall I begin the evacuation process? His voice carried the authority of someone who had managed luxury establishments for over 2 decades. Give them the full 15 minutes, James. I'm feeling generous today. I turned back to Daniel, whose face had progressed from pale to an alarming shade of green. You might want to start making some phone calls. I imagine your guests will need alternative dinner arrangements. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on me. 3 years ago, Daniel had told me I would never amount to anything without his support. He had walked away from our life together, claiming I was holding him back from his true potential. Now here he stood in my hotel, surrounded by my employees, completely at my mercy. Tyler, Daniel's best man, jogged over with his bow tie askew and his usually perfect hair falling across his forehead. Dude, what's going on? People are starting to ask questions, and Ashley is having some kind of breakdown by the shrimp cocktail. I glanced past Daniel to see Ashley gesticulating wildly at the catering staff, her designer gown swishing dramatically as she pointed in my direction. Her mother, a woman I recognized from society photos, was attempting to calm her down, while her father spoke rapidly into his phone. The breakdown is just beginning, I said pleasantly, checking my watch. 14 minutes and 30 seconds remaining. Ashley's voice cut through the ballroom like a siren as she marched toward us, her cathedral-length veil flowing behind her like a war banner. Her face was flushed red, clashing horribly with the pink undertones of her foundation, and her carefully applied makeup was beginning to streak. What kind of sick joke is this? She positioned herself directly in front of me, close enough that I could smell her expensive perfume mixed with the sharp scent of perspiration. Daniel told me you were some nobody he used to date. You can't possibly own this place. I maintained my composure, keeping my voice level and professional. The ownership documents are public record, Ashley. Feel free to verify them through the county clerk's office. This is ridiculous. Ashley's voice rose another octave as she gestured wildly around the ballroom. My father spent a fortune booking this venue. You're probably some delusional waitress pretending to be important. I've seen your type before, all cheap knockoff jewelry and discount store clothes. The insult about my appearance hung in the air like smoke. I was wearing a navy silk dress from a designer boutique in Manhattan, paired with genuine pearl earrings that had belonged to my grandmother. But Ashley's comment wasn't really about my outfit. It was about class, about what she perceived as my place in the social hierarchy. Security! Ashley shrieked, spinning around to address the room. Someone call security and have this woman removed for trespassing. That's when Marcus, my head of security, appeared as if summoned. He was an imposing figure, 6 feet 4 inches tall, with broad shoulders that filled out his tailored black suit. His military background was evident in his precise movements and alert posture. You called for security, ma'am. His deep voice carried across the suddenly quiet ballroom. Ashley pointed at me triumphantly. Yes, this person is trespassing and making wild claims about owning the hotel. I want her arrested immediately. Marcus looked at me with the professional respect he showed to all his employers. Ms. Williams, is there a security concern I should address? The look on Ashley's face was priceless. Her pointing finger slowly lowered as the realization hit her like a physical blow. The wedding guests gasped audibly, and I heard someone whisper, "Oh my God, she actually does own this place." Actually, Marcus, we have some trespassers who need to be escorted out in... I glanced at my watch again. 12 minutes and 45 seconds. Please ensure they exit peacefully and completely. Ashley's father, Richard, chose that moment to approach our growing circle of drama. He was a distinguished-looking man in his 60s with silver hair and the kind of confident bearing that came from decades of wielding financial power. His expensive suit was perfectly tailored, and his gold watch caught the light as he gestured dismissively. Young lady, I don't know what game you're playing, but it ends now. His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. I personally know the owners of this establishment, and you are not among them. I suggest you leave quietly before I have you charged with fraud and harassment. I smiled at Richard's assumption, recognizing the same arrogance that Daniel had inherited and displayed so frequently during our relationship. Please, Mr. Richmond, enlighten me about these owners you know so personally. I've done business with Blackstone Hospitality Group for years. Their CEO is a respected businessman who would never tolerate this kind of disruption. Richard pulled out his phone, his fingers moving confidently across the screen. I'm calling their headquarters right now to have you prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. That's an excellent idea. I agreed, pulling out my own phone and opening the document folder I kept for occasions just like this one. While you're making that call, perhaps you'd like to see the hostile takeover documents I signed this morning. I held up my phone displaying the official paperwork that showed my acquisition of Richmond Manufacturing, Richard's struggling company that had been bleeding money for the past 18 months. His confident expression crumbled as he read the legal documents, his face going through the same color transformation Daniel's had moments earlier. That's impossible. Richard whispered, his phone forgotten in his hand. My company isn't for sale. We have safeguards in place, board protections. Had safeguards, I corrected gently. Past tense. Your board voted unanimously this morning to accept my offer. Apparently, they were quite concerned about the company's financial stability and felt immediate action was necessary. Ashley stared at her father in horror, finally understanding that her wedding wasn't just being canceled, but that her family's entire financial foundation was crumbling beneath them. Daddy, what is she talking about? What takeover? The wedding photographer Sarah stood frozen nearby, her expensive camera hanging around her neck as she tried to decide whether to continue documenting what was clearly no longer a celebration. Wedding guests were pulling out their phones, some live streaming the unfolding drama to their social media followers. Patricia, the wedding coordinator, approached our group with barely contained panic in her eyes. Her professional demeanor was cracking under the pressure of managing a situation that was spiraling completely beyond her control. Excuse me, but what should I tell the caterers? And the band is asking whether they should continue playing. The ice sculpture is starting to melt, and we have 300 guests who are very confused about what's happening. I looked at Patricia with genuine sympathy. She was just trying to do her job, caught in the middle of a situation that was entirely not her fault. Tell the catering staff they'll be fully compensated for their time and efforts. The band can pack up whenever they're ready. As for the guests, they're welcome to stay and enjoy the hotel's restaurant if they'd like to salvage something from this evening. 11 minutes remaining, Marcus announced quietly, consulting his watch with military precision. Ashley's carefully constructed composure finally shattered completely. This isn't happening! She screamed, her voice echoing off the marble walls. This is my wedding day, the most important day of my life. You can't just destroy everything because you're jealous of what Daniel and I have together. The accusation of jealousy stung, but not in the way Ashley intended. I wasn't jealous of her marriage to Daniel. I was grateful to be free of him. But I was furious about the years of my life I had wasted supporting someone who had ultimately betrayed every promise he had ever made to me. This has nothing to do with jealousy, Ashley. This is about consequences for treating people as though they're disposable. I gestured around the elegant ballroom with its hand-painted ceiling murals and imported crystal fixtures. You assumed I was staff because you can't imagine that someone like me could own something like this. That assumption says everything about your character and nothing about mine. Caroline, my executive assistant and closest business confidant, appeared in the ballroom entrance carrying her signature leather portfolio and looking completely unruffled despite the chaos surrounding us. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a professional chignon, and her burgundy suit was immaculate. At 28, she had already proven herself invaluable in managing both my business operations and the more delicate aspects of my personal vendettas. Ms. Williams, I have the additional documentation you requested. she said, approaching our group with the confident stride of someone who belonged in any room she entered. The contracts have been finalized and all parties have been notified. Daniel's face went ashen as Caroline handed me a tablet displaying several official-looking documents. His hands trembled slightly as he recognized what this meant. Another shoe was about to drop, and he was completely powerless to stop it. "What contracts?" Daniel's voice was barely above a whisper, but the desperation in it carried clearly across the marble floor. I scrolled through the tablet, taking my time to review the information, even though I had memorized every detail hours ago. "Well, let's see. There's the notification to Brightstar Technologies that their lease agreement for the downtown office building will not be renewed when it expires next month." Daniel's knees nearly buckled. Brightstar Technologies was his company, the startup that had grown into a moderately successful tech firm over the past 3 years. The downtown office space was crucial to their operations, housing their entire development team and serving as their primary client meeting location. "That's our headquarters," Daniel stammered, his voice cracking with panic. "We've built our entire operation around that location. Our employees, our clients, everything depends on that office space." "I'm aware," I replied calmly, continuing to scroll through the documents. "There's also the matter of your largest client contract. Meridian Financial has decided to terminate their agreement with Brightstar effective immediately. Something about concerns over operational stability and leadership reliability." Tyler, who had been standing nearby trying to process the magnitude of what was unfolding, suddenly stepped forward. His face was pale and his hands were shaking as he pulled out his own phone. "Daniel, my phone has been buzzing nonstop. Jake has been trying to reach you. He says clients are calling to cancel contracts, and the bank is asking questions about our credit lines." Tyler's voice carried the panic of someone watching his career prospects evaporate in real time. Jake Morrison, Daniel's business partner and chief financial officer, came rushing into the ballroom, still wearing his wedding guest attire but looking completely disheveled. His tie was loosened, his hair was messed up from running his hands through it, and his usually confident demeanor had been replaced by barely contained terror. "Daniel, we need to talk. Now. Private." Jake's eyes darted around the room, clearly uncomfortable discussing business matters in front of so many witnesses, but too panicked to wait for privacy. "Whatever you need to say, you can say it here," Daniel replied, his voice hollow with resignation. "I don't think we have any secrets left to protect." Jake glanced nervously at the crowd of wedding guests who were now openly staring and recording everything on their phones. "Meridian wasn't just a client, Daniel. They represented 60% of our revenue. Without them, we can't make payroll next month. And that's before we factor in the cost of relocating our entire operation." Ashley, who had been silent during this exchange, suddenly found her voice again. "Daddy, do something. Make this stop. This crazy woman is destroying our lives." But Richard Richmond was staring at his own phone, his face growing more ashen with each notification that appeared on his screen. His hand shook as he scrolled through what appeared to be urgent messages from his board of directors and legal team. "My attorneys are confirming it," Richard said in a voice that had lost all its earlier authority. "The takeover is legitimate. Blackstone Hospitality Group now controls Richmond Manufacturing. 3 generations of my family's work gone in a single morning." Helen Richmond, Ashley's mother, had been quietly observing the unfolding disaster from near the gift table. She was an elegant woman in her late 50s, dressed in a powder blue mother-of-the-bride ensemble that had probably cost more than most people's monthly salaries. But now her composure was beginning to crack as she realized the full scope of what was happening to her family. "Richard, what does this mean for us? For Ashley's future? For the house, the country club membership, everything?" Her voice carried the particular kind of panic that comes from watching a privileged lifestyle disappear without warning. I felt a moment of sympathy for Helen. Unlike her husband and daughter, she hadn't actively participated in the cruelty I had witnessed today. She was simply collateral damage in a war that had been brewing for 3 years.
The house has a second mortgage that we took out to cover the manufacturing equipment loan,
Richard admitted, his voice barely audible.
If the company goes under, we'll lose everything.
Ashley's scream of anguish echoed through the ballroom, causing several elderly wedding guests to visibly flinch. Her carefully applied makeup was now completely ruined, with mascara streaming down her cheeks in dark rivulets. Her designer gown, which had probably cost more than many people's cars, was beginning to show sweat stains under the arms. "This is all your fault!" Ashley whirled around to face Daniel, her finger pointing accusingly at his chest. "You told me she was nobody. You said she was just some loser you dated before you became successful. You never mentioned she had this kind of power." Daniel's attempt to respond was cut short when Caroline handed me another tablet, this one displaying what appeared to be financial reports and legal documents. "There's one more item, Ms. Williams. The offer Mr. Harrison submitted through intermediaries to purchase the Grandview Hotel was officially rejected this afternoon. The financial assessment showed insufficient collateral and concerning debt-to-income ratios. The final revelation hit Daniel like a physical blow. He had been secretly trying to buy my hotel, probably planning to surprise Ashley by giving her ownership of the venue where they had held their wedding reception. The romantic gesture would have cost him everything he owned, but apparently his credit was already so overextended that the bank had rejected the loan application. "You tried to buy my hotel," I asked, genuinely surprised by this development. "When did you even find out I owned it?" Daniel's voice was barely a whisper when he finally answered.
"I hired a private investigator 6 months ago to find out what happened to you after I left.
When he told me about your business success, I couldn't believe it. I thought if I could buy the hotel and give it to Ashley as a wedding gift, it would somehow make up for what I did to you." The admission hung in the air like a confession, and I could see the exact moment when Ashley realized that her new husband had been thinking about his ex-girlfriend throughout their entire engagement.
9 minutes remaining,"
Marcus announced, his professional demeanor unchanged, despite the emotional carnage surrounding him. The sound of high heels clicking rapidly against marble announced the arrival of additional drama as Ashley's maid of honor, Stephanie, came rushing across the ballroom floor. Her peach-colored bridesmaid dress was slightly wrinkled, and her perfectly styled updo was beginning to come undone from running around trying to manage the crisis. "Ashley, honey, the vendors are asking about payment," Stephanie said breathlessly, clearly trying to maintain some semblance of normal wedding protocol despite the chaos. "The florist wants to know if she should start packing up the centerpieces, and the cake hasn't been cut yet. What do you want me to tell them?" Ashley's response was a sound I can only describe as a wounded animal howl. She grabbed handfuls of her designer gown and began shaking them violently, as if the expensive fabric had personally betrayed her.
"I want you to tell them that this psychotic woman is destroying my perfect day because she's obsessed with my husband."
Rosa, the head caterer, approached our group with the careful steps of someone trying to navigate a minefield. She was a small woman in her 50s with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of decades spent creating beautiful meals for other people's celebrations. Her crisp white chef's coat was immaculate despite having spent hours preparing a feast for 300 guests. "Excuse me, but I need to know about the dinner service. The beef Wellington will be overcooked if we don't serve it within the next 20 minutes, and my servers are asking whether they should continue setting up the champagne toast." Rosa's professional concern was touching in its normalcy amid all the emotional destruction. I felt genuine regret that Rosa's beautiful work was being wasted because of this situation. "Rosa, please have your team pack everything up for the guests to take home. I'll make sure you're compensated for the full amount, plus a 20% gratuity for the inconvenience." "You can't just give away our wedding food!" Ashley shrieked, though her objection was somewhat undermined by the fact that she was no longer going to have a reception where the food would be served.
Actually, I can do whatever I want. It's my hotel, remember?
I turned to Caroline. Please make sure Rose's team is taken care of and arrange for the floral centerpieces to be donated to the hospital.
No point in wasting beautiful things because of ugly behavior.
Daniel had been standing in stunned silence during this exchange, but now he seemed to snap back to awareness of his rapidly deteriorating situation.
Bertha, please. I know I hurt you, and I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but you're destroying innocent people along with me. Jake has a family. Tyler just bought his first house. The 20 employees at Bright Star didn't do anything wrong.
The appeal to my conscience was strategic, but it also revealed something important about Daniel's character development over the past 3 years. The man I had dated would never have considered his employees' welfare when his own interests were threatened.
You're right, I
acknowledged. Your employees don't deserve to suffer for your mistakes. That's why I've already arranged for Meridian Financial to offer positions to any Bright Star employee who wants to transition. Same salary, better benefits, and a more stable company culture.
Jake's expression shifted from panic to confusion.
Wait, what Meridian is offering to hire our people? Caroline consulted her tablet and nodded professionally.
The offer letters were sent out this afternoon. Your entire development team has already accepted positions that start Monday morning. Most of the administrative staff has accepted as well.
The realization hit Daniel and Jake simultaneously. I hadn't just destroyed their business, I had systematically dismantled it by offering their employees better opportunities elsewhere. There would be no dramatic closure, no final confrontation where they could attempt to save their company. By Monday morning, they would simply have no one left to manage.
You planned all of this,
Daniel said, and for the first time since our confrontation began, he sounded more impressed than angry.
The wedding invitation, the timing, everything. You orchestrated this entire evening.
I planned for multiple contingencies, I admitted. Though I have to say Ashley's behavior exceeded even my worst expectations. I thought she might be rude or condescending, but I never imagined she would be quite so publicly cruel. Ashley, who had been growing increasingly agitated during our conversation, suddenly lunged toward me with her hands extended like claws.
This is all your fault. You ruined everything.
My perfect wedding, my family's business, my husband's company. Marcus stepped smoothly between us, his imposing presence immediately stopping Ashley's advance without requiring any physical contact. His military training was evident in how he positioned himself to de-escalate the situation while protecting me from any potential assault.
Ma'am, I need you to step back and calm down,
Marcus said in the firm but respectful tone that had served him well during his years in law enforcement. Physical aggression will result in criminal charges being filed, but Ashley was beyond rational thought. Her carefully maintained socialite facade had completely cracked, revealing the entitled child underneath, who had never been told no in her entire life. Criminal charges? I'm the victim here. This woman has stolen my wedding, destroyed my father's business, and ruined my husband's career. Someone should arrest her.
Actually, ma'am, the only criminal behavior I've witnessed tonight has been your attempted assault,
Marcus replied calmly. Ms. Williams has every legal right to cancel events at her own property and to conduct business transactions as she sees fit. Tony Martinez, a reporter from the local news station, had somehow gained entry to the ballroom and was setting up his camera equipment with the efficiency of someone who recognized a breaking story when he saw one. His presence added a new layer of mortification for Ashley, who suddenly realized that her public breakdown was being documented for broadcast.
"Turn that camera off!"
Ashley screamed, pointing at Tony while her other hand tried unsuccessfully to fix her ruined makeup. This is a private event. Tony consulted his press credentials and looked around the ballroom.
Actually, ma'am, this appears to be a public disturbance taking place in a commercial establishment. I have every right to document newsworthy events. 6 minutes remaining, Marcus announced, his voice cutting through the growing cacophony of arguments, protests, and Ashley's continued shrieking. The wedding band, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, but unsure of their professional obligations, had stopped playing, but remained on stage with their instruments. The lead singer, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, finally approached our group. "Excuse me, but should we pack up our equipment? We're supposed to play until midnight, but this doesn't seem like a celebration anymore." I felt sorry for the musicians who were just trying to do their job and provide beautiful music for what should have been a joyous occasion. "Please pack up whenever you're ready. You'll receive full payment plus a bonus for your time tonight." Ashley's breakdown reached a crescendo as she realized that even the wedding band was abandoning her. "Nobody leaves. This is still my wedding. I'm still the bride. Nothing has changed." But everything had changed, and everyone in the room could see it, except Ashley herself. Her perfect day had become a public humiliation. Her family's financial security had evaporated, and her new husband was facing complete professional ruin. The fairy tale princess wedding she had planned for months was ending in a nightmare that would be talked about for years. Helen Richmond, who had been quietly crying near the gift table, finally found her voice. "Ashley, sweetheart, we need to leave. We need to go home and figure out what to do next." "I'm not leaving." Ashley's voice had taken on a hysterical edge that made several guests visibly uncomfortable. "This is my wedding reception. Nobody can make me leave my own wedding." "Actually," I said quietly, "someone can make you leave. I can. And I am. You have 5 minutes to collect your personal belongings and exit my property. After that, you'll be trespassing and I'll have you arrested." The finality in my voice seemed to cut through Ashley's hysteria like a cold blade. For the first time since this confrontation began, she looked directly at me with something approaching comprehension. She was beginning to understand that her privileged life had just ended, and there was absolutely nothing she could do to stop it. The sound of sirens approaching the hotel added a new layer of tension to the already explosive situation. Through the tall windows of the ballroom, I could see the red and blue lights reflecting off the neighboring buildings as police cars pulled up to the valet station. "Did someone call the police?" Patricia asked nervously, clutching her clipboard against her chest like armor. Her professional composure had completely abandoned her, leaving behind a woman who clearly regretted taking this particular event booking. "I did," Marcus replied, calmly consulting his earpiece as he received communication from his security team. "When the situation escalated to potential physical assault, I followed standard protocol and notified local law enforcement." Ashley's face went through another color transformation, this time shifting from red to ghostly pale as the implications hit her. "Physical assault. I never touched anyone. I was just trying to defend myself against this woman's lies." "Ma'am, you attempted to strike Ms. Williams with your hands extended in a clawing motion," Marcus stated factually, his military background evident in his precise recounting of events. Multiple witnesses observed the action, and the hotel's security cameras recorded the entire incident. Officers, Jennifer Walsh and Michael Kowalski, entered the ballroom with the professional bearing of law enforcement veterans who had seen every possible type of domestic disturbance. Officer Walsh was a compact woman in her 30s, with alert eyes that immediately assessed the situation, while Officer Kowalski was a tall man whose calm demeanor suggested years of experience dealing with volatile situations. "We received a report of a disturbance and potential assault," Officer Walsh said, her voice carrying the authority that came with years of police work. "Can someone explain what happened here?" Before anyone else could respond, Ashley launched into a rambling explanation that painted her as the victim of an elaborate conspiracy designed to ruin her wedding day.
Her account included accusations of fraud, harassment, intimidation, and business sabotage, all delivered in a breathless rush that made her sound increasingly unhinged. Officer Kowalski listened patiently to Ashley's tirade before turning to me with professional courtesy. "Ma'am, I'd like to hear your version of events." I provided a calm, factual account of the evening's events, starting with Ashley's public humiliation of me at the buffet table and ending with her attempted physical assault. I made sure to mention that I had witnesses' security footage and documentation to support every claim I made.
"Do you wish to press charges for the attempted assault?"
Officer Walsh asked, pulling out her notepad to document my response. The question hung in the air like a sword over Ashley's head. Pressing charges would mean arrest booking mugshots and a criminal record that would follow her for the rest of her life. It would also ensure that her wedding day would be remembered not just as the day her life fell apart, but as the day she was taken away in handcuffs. "Yes," I said quietly. "I do want to press charges. Miss Richmond needs to learn that actions have consequences, and that treating people cruelly isn't acceptable just because you think you're superior to them." Ashley's scream of outrage echoed through the ballroom as Officer Kowalski approached her with handcuffs. "This isn't fair! She destroyed my entire life. I was just defending myself. Someone needs to arrest her for what she's done to my family."
"Ma'am, conducting legitimate business transactions and exercising property rights isn't against the law," Officer Walsh explained patiently as her partner began the arrest process. "However, attempted assault is a misdemeanor offense, and we have multiple witnesses who observed your behavior."
That's when Catherine Harrison Daniels' mother arrived at the ballroom entrance. She was a distinguished woman in her early 60s with silver hair styled in an elegant bob and wearing a navy dress that suggested both wealth and excellent taste. Her presence immediately commanded attention not through volume or drama, but through the quiet dignity that came from decades of handling difficult situations with grace. "Daniel, what in God's name is happening here?" Her voice carried the particular combination of disappointment and authority that only mothers could achieve. "I received phone calls from 3 different people telling me that your wedding reception was being shut down by police." Daniel's face crumpled as he saw his mother taking in the scene. Ashley was being read her Miranda rights while still wearing her designer wedding gown. Wedding guests were recording everything on their phones, and the elegant ballroom looked like the aftermath of an emotional bomb explosion.
"Mom, I can explain."
Daniel started, but Catherine held up one perfectly manicured hand to stop him.
"I don't need explanations right now, Daniel. I can see perfectly well what's happening."
She turned to face me, and I was struck by how much Daniel resembled her around the eyes.
"Bertha, I owe you an apology. A profound, heartfelt apology for what my son did to you and for what you've endured here tonight." The unexpected kindness in Catherine's voice caught me completely off guard. I had prepared myself for anger, accusations, and demands for mercy, but not for genuine remorse from Daniel's family.
"Mrs. Harrison, you don't need to apologize for Daniel's choices," I replied, feeling suddenly exhausted by the emotional intensity of the evening.
"Yes, I do,"
Catherine said firmly. "I raised him to treat people with respect and honor his commitments. When he left you for Ashley, I told him he was making the biggest mistake of his life. I told him he was throwing away the best thing that ever happened to him for superficial advantages that wouldn't last." Ashley, who was now being placed in handcuffs, turned to stare at Catherine in horror.
"You knew about her. You knew Daniel used to date this woman, and you never told me."
"I told Daniel he should be honest with you about his past," Catherine replied with the calm dignity that seemed to be her trademark. "I told him that secrets have a way of destroying relationships, and that you deserved to know about the woman he had loved before you." The word "loved" hit the ballroom like a thunderclap. Ashley's face went through another transformation this time, showing the dawning realization that her marriage had been built on lies and half-truths from the very beginning. "He loved her," Ashley's voice was barely a whisper now, all the fight drained out of her as the handcuffs clicked into place.
More than me.
Catherine's silence was answer enough. Officer Walsh began leading Ashley toward the ballroom exit, while Officer Kowalski stayed behind to collect witness statements and document the scene. The sight of the bride being arrested at her own wedding reception would undoubtedly become the stuff of local legend.
Wait!
Ashley called out desperately as she was led away.
Daniel, tell them this is all a mistake.
Tell them you love me more than her. Tell them our marriage means something. But Daniel couldn't meet her eyes. He stood there in his expensive tuxedo, surrounded by the wreckage of his wedding day, unable to offer his new wife the reassurance she desperately needed.
2 minutes remaining,
Marcus announced, though the warning seemed almost anticlimactic, given that half the wedding party was now being processed by law enforcement. Catherine turned back to me, her expression thoughtful.
Bertha,
I know my son doesn't deserve your forgiveness, and I know you have every right to destroy everything he's built. But I'm going to ask you something anyway, not as his mother, but as one woman to another. I waited curious despite myself about what Catherine might say. My son has been miserable for 3 years. He's made terrible choices, hurt the person he loved most, and convinced himself that money and social status could fill the hole in his life. Tonight, he's finally facing the consequences of those choices. Catherine paused, choosing her words carefully. What you've done tonight has been justice pure and simple. But I'm wondering if there might be room for mercy as well. The request hung between us complicated and emotionally charged. Catherine wasn't asking me to forget what Daniel had done or to pretend that his choices hadn't caused real harm. She was asking if destruction was really the only path forward, or if there might be room for something more constructive. Before I could respond, Caroline appeared at my side with another update.
Ms. Williams, the final arrangements have been completed. Hotel security is prepared to escort the remaining guests to alternative dining arrangements, and the vendors have all been compensated according to your instructions.
Looking around the ballroom, I realized that most of the 300 wedding guests had already quietly departed, probably eager to escape the drama and share their incredible stories with friends and family. The elegant reception that had taken months to plan had been completely dismantled in less than an hour.
Time's up,
I announced, though the words felt hollow given everything that had transpired. Elizabeth Montgomery, my business mentor and the woman who had taught me everything about turning pain into power, arrived at the hotel with the impeccable timing that had made her a legend in real estate circles. At 72, she moved with the confidence of someone who had built an empire from nothing and never looked back. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, and her charcoal business suit probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, but she wore wealth like armor rather than decoration.
Well, this is quite a spectacle,
Elizabeth observed, taking in the nearly empty ballroom with its abandoned wedding decorations and scattered security equipment. Her sharp eyes missed nothing as she assessed the situation with the analytical precision that had made her millions.
Elizabeth, what are you doing here?
I asked, genuinely surprised to see my mentor at what had essentially become a crime scene. Caroline called me when things started escalating. She thought you might need some perspective before you did something you couldn't undo. Elizabeth's voice carried the weight of decades spent making difficult decisions in high-stakes situations. Though from what I can see, you've handled things quite thoroughly already. Daniel, who had been standing in stunned silence since his mother's arrival, seemed to recognize Elizabeth's importance even though they had never met. Her presence commanded respect in the way that true power always did, quietly and without need for demonstration.
Mrs. Montgomery,
Catherine said, approaching Elizabeth with the recognition of one influential woman greeting another. I remember reading about your speech at the Women's Business Leadership Conference. You spoke about the difference between revenge and justice.
I did indeed,
Elizabeth replied, studying Catherine with interest.
And if I remember correctly, I also spoke about the importance of knowing when to stop fighting and start building something better. The conversation was clearly directed at me, though Elizabeth was too diplomatic to give advice directly. Instead, she was creating space for me to think beyond the immediate satisfaction of complete victory. Roberto Chavez, the hotel's night manager, approached our small group with the careful deference of an employee who understood his place in the hierarchy but needed guidance on practical matters.
Ms. Williams, we have several logistical issues that need your attention,
Roberto said, consulting his tablet.
The kitchen staff is asking about meal preparation for tomorrow's breakfast service. Housekeeping needs to know about room turnover schedules, and the concierge has received numerous calls from local media requesting interviews.
The reminder that life continued beyond this evening's drama was strangely grounding. I had a business to run, employees who depended on me, and responsibilities that extended far beyond settling old scores with former boyfriends. Handle everything according to standard procedures, Roberto. Tomorrow is a normal business day. I paused, considering the media attention.
And please route all press inquiries to Caroline. We won't be making any statements tonight.
Lisa Chen, Daniel's communications director, had been quietly observing from near the gift table, probably trying to figure out how to manage the public relations nightmare her boss's wedding had become. She was a young woman in her late 20s with the sharp intelligence that came from working in crisis management, and she approached our group with obvious reluctance.
Mr. Harrison, I need to discuss damage control strategies, Lisa said quietly, clearly hoping to avoid making the situation worse.
The story is already spreading on social media, and I've received calls from 3 business publications asking for comment.
Daniel looked at Lisa as if she were speaking a foreign language.
Damage control, Lisa. There's no controlling this. By tomorrow morning, everyone in the business community will know that I lost my company, my office building, and my wife all in the same evening.
That's true, Elizabeth interjected thoughtfully. But the question is, what story do you want them to tell about what happens next? Do you want to be remembered as the man whose life fell apart, or as the man who learned from his mistakes and rebuilt himself into something better? The suggestion hung in the air like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. Daniel looked at Elizabeth with something approaching hope for the first time all evening.
What do you mean? He asked quietly.
I mean that every successful person I know has at least one story about a moment when they lost everything and had to decide whether to give up or fight back, Elizabeth replied. The difference between those who succeed and those who don't isn't whether they fall down. It's what they do when they get back up. I found myself listening to this conversation with growing interest. Part of me had expected to feel satisfied by Daniel's complete destruction, but instead, I felt oddly empty. Revenge had delivered exactly what it promised, but it hadn't healed the wounds that had driven me to seek it in the first place. Catherine, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward again.
Bertha, I know I have no right to ask this, but would you consider giving Daniel a chance to prove he's learned from his mistakes? Not for his sake, but for yours.
For mine? I asked, genuinely confused by the suggestion. Carrying anger and resentment is like holding onto a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You're the one who gets burned, Catherine explained gently. You've proven your point tonight. You've shown Daniel and everyone else that actions have consequences, but continuing to punish him won't undo the pain he caused you. Only forgiveness can do that. The Buddhist wisdom in Catherine's words was unexpected, but it resonated with something deep inside me that I had been trying to ignore. My quest for revenge had been successful beyond my wildest dreams, but it hadn't made me feel whole again. What exactly are you suggesting? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer.
I'm suggesting that you consider offering Daniel a chance at redemption, Elizabeth said, her business mind clearly seeing possibilities that others had missed. Not a free pass, and not a return to how things were before, but a structured opportunity to prove he's capable of growth and change. Caroline, who knew me better than anyone, sensed the direction of my thoughts and pulled out her tablet to show me something.
Ms. Williams, there's one more piece of information you should consider. The employee transition letters from Bright Star to Meridian included exit interviews. Every single person mentioned that they would recommend working for Mr. Harrison again if he could provide better job security and company culture. The revelation that Daniel's employees actually respected him despite everything was surprising. I had expected them to abandon ship at the first opportunity, but apparently he had become a better leader over the past 3 years, even if he hadn't become a better person.
What are you proposing exactly?
Daniel asked, his voice carrying a mixture of hope and wariness. I'm proposing a test, I replied, the idea forming as I spoke. You've lost everything tonight because of choices you made 3 years ago. If you're truly sorry and truly changed, then prove it. Rebuild your life without your family's money, without Ashley's social connections, and without taking shortcuts.
And if I succeed?
Daniel asked quietly. If you succeed, then maybe we can talk about forgiveness. Maybe we can even talk about friendship, though that's a long way off. I paused, making sure he understood the conditions. But if you fail, if you revert to the selfish, entitled person you were before then, the consequences will be permanent. The offer was more generous than Daniel had any right to expect, but it wasn't motivated by kindness. It was motivated by the realization that my own healing depended on something more constructive than endless punishment.
I'll do it,
Daniel said immediately, then caught himself.
But what about the office building, my company's lease?
You can buy the building back, I replied, at market value with standard financing, just like any other business transaction. No favors, no special deals. If you can rebuild your company well enough to afford the purchase price, then you've earned it. Elizabeth smiled approvingly at the structure I had created. It was fair without being charitable, demanding without being impossible. It offered redemption without guaranteeing it. And Ashley? Catherine asked quietly. I considered the question carefully. Ashley's behavior tonight had been inexcusable, but she was also a victim of her upbringing and circumstances. Ashley made her own choices tonight. The consequences she's facing are the result of her actions, not mine. But if she wants to learn from this experience and grow into a better person, I won't stand in her way. As if summoned by our conversation, Patricia appeared with an update about the legal proceedings.
The police have finished processing Miss Richmond. She's been released on her own recognizance with a court date next month. She's asking if she can speak with you before leaving the hotel.
The request surprised me. After everything that had happened, I couldn't imagine what Ashley might want to say.
Tell her she has 5 minutes,
I decided.
But the conversation happens here in front of witnesses. A few minutes later, Ashley appeared in the ballroom doorway, looking nothing like the radiant bride who had arrived hours earlier. Her designer gown was wrinkled and stained, her makeup was completely gone, and her hair hung limply around her shoulders. But more importantly, something fundamental had changed in her demeanor. The arrogance and entitlement were gone, replaced by what looked like genuine remorse.
I wanted to apologize, Ashley said quietly, her voice barely carrying across the marble floor.
What I said to you tonight was cruel and unforgivable. I treated you like you were less than human, and I'm ashamed of myself.
The apology was so unexpected that I found myself speechless for a moment. I was raised to think that money and social status made me better than other people. Ashley continued, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. Tonight showed me how ugly that belief system really is. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I understand how wrong I was. The transformation in Ashley's demeanor was remarkable. The entitled socialite had been replaced by a young woman who seemed to be seeing herself clearly for the first time.
What will you do now?
I asked, genuinely curious about her plans.
I don't know,
Ashley admitted.
My father's business is gone. My marriage is over before it really began, and I have a criminal record.
I'll probably have to get a job for the first time in my life and figure out who I am when I'm not daddy's little princess." The honesty in her response was refreshing after years of dealing with people who never admitted their mistakes. "If you're serious about changing Ashley, then I wish you well," I said. "Everyone deserves a chance at redemption, but only if they're willing to do the hard work of earning it." Ashley nodded, tears forming in her eyes. "Thank you for that. And thank you for showing me that there are consequences for treating people badly. I needed to learn that lesson, even if it was the most painful day of my life." As Ashley left the ballroom for the final time, I realized that my evening of revenge had become something much more complex and meaningful than I had originally intended. 6 months had passed since the wedding that became legend in our city's social circles. The story had been retold countless times, growing more dramatic with each telling, but the basic facts remained unchanged. A scorned woman had systematically dismantled her ex-boyfriend's life in a single evening, only to offer him an unexpected path to redemption. I stood in my office on the 30th floor of the Meridian Tower, looking out over the downtown skyline that now included several buildings in my growing portfolio. The morning sun cast long shadows across the city, and I could see the Grandview Hotel in the distance, its elegant facade glinting in the golden light. It had been a profitable 6 months for Blackstone Hospitality Group, with 3 new acquisitions and a reputation for both luxury service and fair employment practices. Caroline knocked on my office door before entering with her usual efficient grace. At 28, she had grown from assistant to full business partner with an equity stake in the company that reflected her invaluable contributions to our success. "The morning reports are ready," Caroline said, settling into the chair across from my desk with her signature leather portfolio. "Hotel occupancy rates are up 12% from last quarter. The restaurant received another excellent review from Food and Wine magazine, and we have 2 more acquisition opportunities that look promising." "What about the other projects?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from the satisfied expression on Caroline's face. "Daniel's company secured its 3rd major client this week. Brightstar Technologies now has enough revenue to support 15 employees, and they're projected to be profitable within the next quarter." Caroline consulted her notes with professional precision. "He submitted the paperwork to begin negotiating the purchase of his office building, and his credit rating has improved significantly." The news about Daniel's progress wasn't surprising. Over the past 6 months, I had watched him transform from an entitled executive who took shortcuts to a hardworking entrepreneur who earned every success through honest effort. He had started over with nothing but his technical skills and determination, building a new company culture based on respect and integrity rather than connections and privilege. "And Ashley?" I inquired, though I already knew that story as well. "She completed her community service requirement ahead of schedule and enrolled in a business administration program at the community college," Caroline reported. "According to her probation officer, she's been working part-time at a nonprofit organization that provides job training for women re-entering the workforce. She's also been attending therapy to address what she calls her privilege blindness." The transformation in both Daniel and Ashley had been remarkable to witness. Losing everything had forced them to confront their character flaws and make fundamental changes in how they approached life and relationships. They had both chosen growth over bitterness, which was more than I had expected from either of them. "James." My hotel manager appeared in the doorway with his customary professional bearing. "Ms. Williams, there's someone here to see you. Daniel Harrison is in the lobby requesting a meeting. He says he has something important to discuss." I glanced at Caroline, who nodded encouragingly. "Send him up, James. And could you arrange for coffee to be brought to the conference room?" "Of course, Ms. Williams. Right away." 10 minutes later, Daniel sat across from me in the conference room, looking healthier and more confident than I had seen him in years. He had lost the soft edges that came from an easy life, replacing them with the lean strength that came from genuine hard work. His suit was well-tailored but not expensive, and his demeanor carried the quiet confidence of someone who had earned his success rather than inherited it.
Thank you for seeing me, Bertha. I know I don't have the right to ask for your time, but I wanted to give you an update on my progress.
Daniel's voice carried a humility that would have been impossible 6 months earlier.
Caroline has been keeping me informed about Bright Star's development,
I replied, pouring coffee from the service James had arranged.
Congratulations on landing the Morrison account. That's a significant client for a startup.
Thank you. It feels good to win business based on merit rather than connections. Daniel accepted the coffee gratefully, his hands steady and his eye contact direct.
But I'm not here to talk about business success. I'm here to talk about something more important.
I waited, curious about what Daniel considered more important than the financial recovery that had consumed his attention for months.
I've learned something over the past 6 months that I should have understood years ago.
Daniel continued, his voice growing more earnest.
Success without character is meaningless. Money without integrity is worthless. And power without compassion is ultimately destructive.
The words carried the weight of genuine realization rather than empty platitudes. I'm glad you've learned those lessons, Daniel. They'll serve you well in business and in life.
I've also learned something specific about you that I was too selfish to see before.
Daniel leaned forward slightly, his expression serious.
You didn't destroy my life that night, Bertha. You saved it. You forced me to confront who I had become and gave me a chance to become someone better.
The acknowledgement was unexpected, but it resonated with something I had begun to understand about my own motivations. My evening of revenge had been as much about my own healing as it had been about Daniel's punishment.
What you did required incredible strength and self-control,
Daniel continued.
You could have destroyed me completely and walked away.
Instead, you offered redemption to someone who didn't deserve it.
That's not revenge, Bertha. That's mercy.
Catherine Harrison appeared in the conference room doorway, escorted by James and carrying a small wrapped package.
I hope you don't mind the intrusion, Bertha,
but I wanted to thank you personally for what you've done for my son. Mrs. Harrison, please come in. Would you like some coffee?
That would be lovely, thank you.
Catherine settled into a chair with the same graceful dignity she had displayed during the wedding disaster.
I brought you something small, just a token of my appreciation.
The package contained a beautiful antique compass, its brass surface polished to a warm glow. The inscription read, "True North, for finding the right direction when the path is unclear." It belonged to my father, Catherine explained. He was a ship's captain who always said that the most important navigation happened during storms when it was hardest to see the way forward. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. The past 6 months had been about finding my own true north, learning to navigate between justice and mercy, between protecting myself and helping others grow.
There's one more thing I wanted to discuss,
Daniel said, pulling out a folder from his briefcase.
I've prepared an offer to purchase the downtown office building as we agreed. Market value, standard financing terms, no special considerations.
I reviewed the offer documents with professional interest. Daniel had done his homework, presenting a fair market analysis and demonstrating that his company could support the mortgage payments without overextending itself financially.
This looks reasonable,
I acknowledged. Caroline will review the details with our legal team, but I don't see any obvious problems with the proposal.
Thank you,
Daniel replied, then hesitated before continuing.
But I have to ask you something. If I'm successful, if I complete this purchase and continue building my company ethically, what happens between us then?
It was a fair question and one I had been asking myself for months. I think we could be friends again, Daniel. Not the same as before because we're both different people now, but I think we could build something new based on mutual respect and shared values. The relief in Daniel's expression was evident, but he seemed to understand that friendship would be earned gradually rather than granted immediately. Caroline looked up from her tablet with a small smile.
Speaking of shared values, I should mention that Brightstar Technologies has been selected as a preferred vendor for 3 of our hotel properties. Their proposal was the best combination of quality value and ethical business practices. The news surprised Daniel, though it shouldn't have. His company had earned the contracts through merit, proving that success built on integrity was more sustainable than success built on shortcuts. "Before you go," I said, standing to signal the end of our meeting, "I have something for you as well." I handed Daniel a small velvet box containing a simple silver watch. The inscription read, "Time well spent, for building something that lasts." "Every successful person needs to understand the value of time," I explained, "not just for making money, but for making amends, building character, and creating something meaningful." Daniel's eyes filled with tears as he read the inscription. "Thank you, Bertha, for everything, for the justice, for the mercy, and for the chance to become someone worthy of your friendship." As Daniel and Catherine left my office, I felt a sense of completion that had been missing from my life for 3 years. The pain of betrayal had been transformed into something constructive. The desire for revenge had evolved into an opportunity for redemption, and the anger that had driven me had given way to something resembling peace. Caroline remained behind, studying me with the perceptive intelligence that made her such a valuable partner. "How do you feel?" she asked simply. "Grateful," I replied, surprising myself with the honesty of the answer. Grateful for the pain that made me stronger, grateful for the betrayal that taught me my own worth, and grateful for the chance to turn destruction into something creative. "And Daniel, how do you feel about him?" I considered the question carefully. "I feel proud of him for doing the hard work of changing and hopeful that he'll continue growing into the person he's capable of becoming. But mostly I feel free. Free from anger, free from the past, and free to build whatever comes next." The antique compass sat on my desk, its needle pointing steadily toward magnetic north. But true north, I had learned, wasn't about direction. It was about values, character, and the courage to choose mercy over revenge when the opportunity arose. 6 months after the wedding that wasn't, I had discovered something more valuable than any business empire, the understanding that real power came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when to heal instead. Looking out over the city that had become my domain, I realized that the most successful revenge was the kind that transformed everyone involved into better versions of themselves. Daniel had learned about integrity. Ashley had discovered humility, and I had found the strength that came from choosing grace over grudges. The compass needle held steady, pointing toward a future built on foundations strong enough to last. Now I'm curious about your own experiences with difficult relationships and second chances. Have you ever been in a situation where someone's betrayal actually led you to discover strength you didn't know you had? Or perhaps you've witnessed someone transform themselves after facing real consequences for their actions? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like, subscribe for more content about resilience and redemption, and share it with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the best revenge is becoming the person you were meant to be all along. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I hope you find your own true north in whatever storms you're navigating. Until next time, remember that the strongest people aren't those who never fall down, but those who choose to help others up when they get back on their feet.